Hi everyone, it's Pedro Baez from Go for Glory Stable, and I am the founder and managing partner of Go for Glory Stable. We are a fractional ownership group where we basically have a platform to allow people to build a racehorse stable of their own desire. So we do both conditioned racehorses, which race every week at your local racetrack. We do claimers, where you can purchase them out of a race and race them the next week. And then we do stakes racing and baby horses. So that's what we're going to talk about here is the stakes horses and at a high level of that process. So this video is wanted to put it together because it just seems like there's not enough of a knowledge out there. It's kind of like all over the place. There's websites that say this, there's some websites that say that, and somebody might say this, somebody might say that. So I wanted to put a summary together. Just basically, it's nothing fancy. This summary video isn't gonna. You're not gonna. Hopefully, I mean, you never know, but I'm not expecting anyone to take this video and start becoming an expert baby horse owner and investor. But I want to basically give a high level view where you can understand the whole process, because to me personally, it's my favorite part of owning in this game and owning in harness racing. And it even for me, it took me a while to understand it. It took, in the beginning, it was a little bit daunting, because you got to pay bills, for a bunch of months, and there's not really like any sort of guarantee of what you're going to get. And in the beginning, when I first started owning, it was one of those things that was a little bit scary. And then I kind of like dipped my toes in a little bit here and there, and then I kind of started getting a feel. And then, eventually I just once I really understood it and I had a really good grasp of it, and I started to really enjoy the process. And really, to me, it's my favorite part of owning, and to me, it's the most rewarding part of owning. And it's one of the reasons why there's so many owners out there who do stakes racing, and where stakes racing is one of the only, or maybe the main thing that they're doing, is buying yearlings for stakes racing. So there is a massive industry, there is a massive sector of the game where owners are, like I said earlier, like conditioned horses and claimers, that horses that are racing every single week. And those are good too. You can make a lot of money in that world. And they're at your local tracks. They're racing every week. Especially during the off season, during the winter and stuff. They kind of give you a lot of action, and you need those. So I'm not discounting that. Your stable needs to be majority of those, but majority of those because they provide income, they provide cash flow, they provide action. They kind of keep the lights on, as I say. They're from a baseball terminology. Those are like the singles, doubles, bunts, things like that. They're kind of keeping the game moving. And then while you got the stakes racing horses lying in the wings, and they're the home run swings. So they're the ones that you're swinging for the fences, and you're really hoping you get lucky with one. Or if you don't get a great one, that you get a pretty good one. So that's why I put this video together. It's going to be pretty short, pretty high level, but I just want you to understand basically how the game works, the baby game works, the timeline of it, and just kind of how it all, kind of like some little snippet of what things mean and what things are, and kind of how it all comes together. So, with that being said, let's get started. So we're gonna do a slideshow here. All right, everyone. So this is a fancy presentation we put together, and here we go. So investing in harness racing stakes horses. I am not going to read word for word, but you can read it for yourself afterwards if you like, or replay the video if you'd like or pause it to see what the words are. So basically, investing in harness racing stakes horses, and these are standardbred standardbred racehorses. And some people call it the baby game. So you might hear me say like, oh, investing in babies or baby game. If you hear that, that means stakes racing, yearlings, 2-year-olds. They turn to 3-year-olds, and they're not babies anymore. But if you hear that, like baby game and all that stuff, that's what that means. It's this part of the game, stakes racing. It's not the claimers and the conditioned racehorse and things like that. So, but to me, it's the best. So that's why I want to make sure everyone understands it. So here we go. So let's go to the first slide here. Harness racing, standardbred breeding farms. Okay, so I wanted to kind of start from the beginning. So I don't want to start with just like the sales and stuff. Although, we could. That's coming up. That's a big part of the baby game in general. But from a breeding farm perspective, there's a lot of people who make a living in this game. So you see the drivers out there every day, racing, and you're kind of like, oh, that's cool. You see the trainers who are training the horses. You got the owners who are investing and owning the horses. You got the racetrack operators. You got the people working at the racetracks, the announcers, the people at the security. You got the bettors. You got a lot of. There's a lot of people who are making a living in this game, and then breeders are one of the biggest components of this game. Without breeders, you wouldn't have horses. So there's different types of breeders. So there's commercial breeders. So what I'm showing here, like Hanover Shoe Farms, Cameo Hills, Winback Farm, Blue Chip Farm, these are just farms that more in the Northeast that operate where Go for Glory stable operates. There's big farms also that are in Ohio, Indiana, Canada, other states as well. So these aren't, by all means, these aren't like the biggest ones, and it's not the only ones out there. There's a lot. And these commercial breeding farms, they're big businesses, like they're big businesses on their own. So like Hanover probably has hundreds of brood mares, and they're breeding hundreds of horses every year, and then they're selling them all, and then they might, I don't know if they keep any of them, meaning owning a bit of them to race, but some breeding farms do. So these breeders, what they do is they're buying brood mares, which we'll get to what that is, but that's basically a female standardbred horse that was bought specifically to breed and create other standardbred racehorses and basically with the goal that people will pay more than the breeding farm cost to raise them and to breed them. So it's kind of just like any sort of business in that regard. But it's like just like for them, there's no guarantee. You can have a horse, a horse that it really looks good and everything like that, and then the yearling, the mare might not get in foal for whatever reason, meaning get in foal, meaning get pregnant for whatever reason. Things could happen where the yearling might get hurt or something, or the foal might get hurt, that comes out, or there could be sicknesses, things like that. So there's a lot of, from their breeding side, it's not a simple thing like, oh, you buy a mare, you breed her, and she has a baby, and you sell it and you make money. It's hard to make money because you have to keep your costs down for the breeders. You gotta. It's a whole different world, that breeding side of the business. But a lot of people do it. A lot of people get into the game and get into breeding and open up breeding farms. I mean, you don't see them doing it like often, but people do. A lot of people do, and they used to do it a lot back in the day, where big owners they were breeding their own horses too, and we still have some, but not as much as we used to. So now we have a lot of these commercial breeders where they're mainly breeding to sell. They're breeding to sell, to make a profit, and then there's other ways that they make money when the horses are racing and things like that. So, which we're not going to get into in this video, but this just to give you an idea that these are the breeding farms that they are purchasing the mares to be bred. They are finding that they're matching them with a stallion to breed to them. They are performing the vet work, all that stuff to actually have those horse babies, and then the foals, and then they're the ones that are keeping the mother and then the foal healthy until the foal's a yearling to sell at the yearling sales. And then it's a long-term endeavor. It's like for a breeder, it's like you say a yearling, that's 1 year old, but it's more like a 2 to 3 year endeavor because and we'll get into it in a little bit, but these breeders. It's a long-term investment. What they're doing, and it's no guarantee to make a profit or anything. But that's what their game is. They're buying mares. They're trying to breed them to the stallions that they think that can produce the most sought after yearling, and hopefully that they can sell that yearling for a very good profit. So, or some of them, like I said, some of them might own and race the horse themselves. So those are breeders, and those are the ones where when you go to the sale, a yearling sale, it'll say, this horse is, bred by so and so, Hanover Shoe Farms, and you say, okay, or this horse is bred by Winback Farms, Cameo Hill Farms. Those are the ones who bred it. They have a farm. That's where the babies and the yearlings are raised. When the sale time, they take all those yearlings that are ready for the sale, and then they ship them to the sale site, and then people go and purchase and bid on those yearlings, and then take them home. And then the breeders begin all over again, breeding the next future of racehorses. So that's where the racehorses come from, and there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of racehorses out there, and a lot of babies being bred. All right, so let's talk about stallions. So stallions, they are, just to read right here, they're the adult male horses, and they are not castrated. So meaning they are still able to reproduce. They're still able to impregnate and breed to female horses. So you'll see a lot of horses there who are castrated are called geldings, and there's nothing, there's a lot of horses a lot of male horses that are geldings, and they're castrated for a number of reasons. It could be maybe they're acting. They call it studdy, they're acting too much testosterone, and they're hard to handle, or they're not listening, or they're constantly looking at other female horses and things like that, and they can't pay attention to their job. There's a lot of reasons horses get gelded. Maybe it could be a medical reason, and but a lot of horses get gelded, especially if they don't really have like a future as a stallion. If the trainer and owner maybe they're a cheaper horse and they're like, I don't think they really have a future. Let's just geld them and make sure that way we don't have any issues down the road. And I just want a racehorse. So there's a lot of geldings out there, but there are also colts, colts or horses or stallions, studs that are racing, and the ultimate goal is to get a stud. So that's when you do stakes, when you're buying yearlings and you're buying colts, the dream is you have a colt that's so good that it can become a stallion that breeding farms that we just talked about are willing to pay you thousands of dollars just to breed to your stallion. So that if you get one of those, I mean, that is like, because they can, horses live till 25, 28 years old, sometimes 30, something like that. So, I mean, if you got a horse that's really amazing stallion that's producing champions year after year after year, you can make a lot of money. And that stallion could pay for all your other future horses and things like that. And it's just free. I don't want to say free money, but it's just pure profit coming in every year, because they're just, the horse is just hanging out at the, at the stud farm that he's at, and he just in the stall, and you have some costs associated with it, but stallions are if you get so lucky that you somehow have a really good stallion, you hit the jackpot. So this is the goal of all stakes racing owners. An amazing stallion would be number one, and then amazing broodmare, but we'll get to that. The broodmare is next. So, but these are the stallions. So, the best racehorses become stallions. That's usually how it goes. And then the owners are always looking for the top stallions. So the better stallions, I have down here Chapter 7, Wallner for the Trotters, Captain Treacherous, Huntsville for the Pacers. There's more right now. There's more in demand for Trotters, because Trotters is more of a worldwide thing. You got France, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, a lot of countries, even Australia, New Zealand have Trotters, Italy. So there's Trotters everywhere. It's kind of more of a worldwide thing, and so due to that, they're usually a little bit more in demand. So that's why Chapter 7, who's one of the best, he's in New York, one of the best trotting stallions in the game. I think he cost like 40,000 or 50,000. I haven't checked recently to just for one foal, just to breed one mare to him. I think it's around 40 to 50,000 if I last checked. And same with Walner, who's actually a son of Chapter 7. And that's a lot of money. And they can breed in the U.S. or North America. They can breed up to 140 times. So just do the math. $40,000 times 100. What is that? Million? That's a million, I think. 4 million, and then another 40 of that. So we're talking almost $6 million that someone like a Chapter 7 owner, if they own Chapter 7 100%, it's that $6 million they're making every year, and all the horse has to do is just breed, to other mares. So that's and you can get that for 25 years. So that's like the dream. That's the dream of all baby owners. But like I said, it's a dream, meaning it's extremely hard to get that, and you got to be in the game for a while. It's a hard thing to do. So that's stallions, and there's good stallions on the pacing side as well. They're a little bit cheaper on the pacing side, just because it's a little bit less of a world market on the pacers. It's really more like a North America, Australia, New Zealand thing mainly. So there's a little bit less of a demand for the pacers. You can still make a lot of money buying pacing yearlings, and we enjoy pacing yearlings for that reason. So, they're both excellent, and you can both do very well with both of them. And the pacers, you don't have to deal with the breaking. Trotters, you have to trot, and trotting sometimes can be difficult for trotters, and it's a little bit easier to start galloping when you're trotting fast versus pacers. They usually kind of stick to pacing a little bit easier versus jumping into a gallop. So there's give and take, but the point of this slide is stallions are breeders are trying to breed their mares to the best stallions or whatever match they can find that produces the best type of offspring that does well. Maybe it's not maybe they Chapter 7 and their mare is producing monsters, so they're going to keep trying to do Chapter 7 every year. Maybe it's a lesser sire. Maybe they're like, oh, Chapter 7, I'm not getting anything, so then they go to a lesser sire, like a second tier, third tier, cheaper sire, and they're hitting, those offspring are starting to become really good. And they're like, okay, maybe this mare is better suited for those. It's not really a science here, it's like an art, and but a lot goes into it. So stallions are a major part of the game. All right, brood mares. These are the female part. We just talked about the males. These are the females that have been, for specific reasons, they've been selected by breeders to breed. And a lot of times, these horses, these brood mares were previous racehorses, and a lot of times they were really good, and they made like over $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $1 million, $2 million, and then that's an obvious reason that mare. People will want the foals from that mare if she was really good in the racetrack, with the hopes that her children will be, really good as well. So, so a lot of those broodmares are racehorses like that. But also, a lot of broodmares were never really that good racehorses. Maybe they got injured. Maybe they just had some sort of, who knows what it was, sickness or whatever it was, that they couldn't make money on the track, or they just weren't good. They were just slow, or they broke all the time. They couldn't trot, they couldn't pace, and or they had a bad attitude, whatever it was. And then they might have a great family. They might have a great maternal family, which is on their mother's side. They might have a solid sire too, like a solid stallion. Their father might be a solid top stallion, but their maternal side might be really good. It might be like jam-packed with nothing but, really producing mares, just pumping out, top racehorses every year. And when breeders see that, they love those mares. They want those mares in there to add to their broodmare band to breed, just as well as horses as mares that have done well on the racetrack. So it's a little bit different than the guys. Whereas to be a stallion, for the most part, you have to be incredible on the racetrack. For the most part, it does happen every now and then where you have a stallion that didn't do well, and they're just, maybe he was like a sibling of like a really good stallion, and people kind of taking a stab on that. But for the most part, the stallions usually have some sort of proven ability on the racetrack. And then, but the broodmares, not necessarily. Not necessarily. There's a lot of broodmares that have been excellent broodmares that never even raced a day in their life. They just were unbelievable, producing winners and champions. So that's the broodmare. So the breeders are always trying to buy broodmares. And the good thing about buying, and that's one of the reasons why buying fillies, filly pacers, filly trotters, it's really good to buy those because you, like I'm talking about, you'll always have that as long as they have some type of pedigree, or even made some money or did pretty good in the racetrack, you'll pretty much always have a demand from a breeder to buy that horse. So that's the allure of that's why if you look at yearling sales, the fillies they usually actually sell for more money than the colts, and the reason being is because there's a residual value. You'll hear people say broodmare residual value, because when a broodmare, I mean if like for example, we have a horse. Well, not we have a horse. I'm just going to get. There's been horses that people they claim a filly or they claim a mare or whatever, and then a sibling of that horse just like takes off and wins some big stakes races, and all of a sudden they buy the horse for 15 grand, and the horses, breeders are asking for 100 grand to pay 100 grand for that horse because now that family is a hot family and so good. So broodmares are a big part of the game. Always keep that in your mind, and that's why filly pacers, filly trotters, don't discount them. Don't, they have a lot of insurance built in, so that's a good place to be. So broodmares are very big in this game. All right, foal. This is just going to be pretty short. So a foal is just a horse that's less than 1 year that a dam just had, and essentially the only thing to note here is that horses are kind of a little bit similar to humans, and that humans are 9 months to have a baby. Horses are like 11 months, sometimes 12 months to have a foal, so it's a little bit longer than humans. And it's usually like one at a time. That it's not like a dog, that has multiple pups and stuff, or cats and things like that. So, and then the goal is to have your foal as early in the year as possible. So it's just like kind of in school. If you have children in school, whatever, and you see those kids who were either held back or those kids who are like born, right after the cutoff, and they have almost like a full year over that kid who was born like right before the cutoff. So you might have a kid that's almost 12 months older than the other kid, and you can just look at him like, wow, that kid's huge, or way more advanced. And it's kind of like with horses, so that's why when owners are looking for horses, they kind of want they want them to be as early in the year as possible. January, February, March, that's like the goal, and then April's not bad. But then once you start getting into like May and June, you're like, all right, then you're going to have some more of a younger horse. Your horse is going to be more on the younger side, facing other horses who were born earlier in the year. There's been great horses that are born in May and June as well. So I'm not saying it's a necessarily a bad thing, because you can have a great horse that was foaled in May and June as well. It's just what owners typically kind of think about, like when they're buying yearlings. So, and then breeders too, they know that as well. So they're trying to get them more as early as possible. So that's a foal. So then they become a weanling after that, and then they become a yearling. So that's a picture of a foal right there. All right, yearling's obviously a little bit. It's bigger than a foal because it's a full year of eating and developing, and they become a yearling after 1 year. So the only thing to keep in mind really here is they even though they become a yearling after 1 year, like I said, not like I said, but from a racehorse perspective, it's based on the calendar year, not really on the horse's birth date. So you can have a horse, like in this example, you can have a horse born in April of a year, but next year, the year later, or 2 years later, they'll become a 2-year-old as of January 1st. Although in reality, they haven't really hit 2 years old. They're not really 2 until like April. So, but you'll see in the program things like that. They're saying 2 years old. Every horse is 2 years old, but some of them might not even be 2 years old yet. Some of them might still technically be 1 year old. But usually by the time they're racing, usually by the time they're racing, they're all actually 2 years old by then. But that's just something to keep in mind, that as of January 1st is when you see 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old is as of January 1st, not the actual horse's birthday. So it's a little unique in that regard. All right, so we have a lot here. So I'm just gonna try to summarize it. This is the kind of like the risk and reward. Now we're getting into like actually owning a yearling and things like that. So, so the risk. Let's talk about the risk side. So the first thing to note is that you see these people, these big owners, and they're spending 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 on yearlings. They're buying a lot of yearlings. So they're buying 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, who knows? They're buying a lot of yearlings every year, and they're spending a lot of money on all those yearlings every year. So you only see the good ones that become great, that they spend 300,000 on, but no one really talks about all those bad ones that became nothing. So with that being said, you can't buy yourself to success with the baby game. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to have a blank check and I'm just going to buy the most expensive babies and I'm going to get all the champions and get a stallion and get all these big time brood mares." That's not how it works. You have to have like a strategy, and you have to kind of keep that in mind, that there's no guarantees. You can pay a lot for a horse and it could become nothing. You can pay 15 grand for a horse, it could become a superstar. Bulldog Hanover, I think, was like 28 grand, and he was one of the fastest, or is the fastest racehorse in history of the game. 28 grand might be Canadian, I think. I gotta check, or 26, one of those, but it wasn't much, and he was the fastest pacer in history of the game. So, the risk is that even though the horse might look amazing, you might fall in love with it, you might fall in love with the video, you might fall in love with the pedigree, you might think everything, the stallion's perfect, the mare's perfect, everything's great, family's amazing. It could still not work out for a lot of reasons. So that's the risk with yearlings, is that you don't really know. You don't know for sure what's going to happen. So that's that. The second part I want to put is just the ones who make the races. So me personally, I always go with like a 65% success rate, that you buy a yearling that it's going to actually qualify and race for you as a 2-year-old. You're probably like, "Whoa, that's terrible. Like, I want to buy all my yearlings to race." We all do, but there's a lot of reasons why they don't. So sometimes they get sick, there's an injury, they need surgery, their attitude isn't right, they need more time to mature, they're braking, like they're not trotting, they're not pacing, they're not getting around the turns properly, as good as they should, and you need to get around turns in the game. They don't race in a straight line. So there's like so many things, that kind of jumps to the last part, is there's so many things that have to go right for horses to do well and make the races. So as a 2-year-old, I'd say, for me, I would say 2 out of 3. I'm hoping 2 out of 3 make it. And sometimes I've had years where all of them made it. So it's not like, when I say 2 out of 3, I'm not saying it's like a exact science, but I've had years where they all made it. But that's kind of the way to look at it. And then when one doesn't make it for whatever reason, then you have to sell it, or you have to wait until 3-year-old season. It's just part of the game. It's like a numbers game. So for the baby game, is like a numbers game. That's why I say just don't do one. Don't do one, because if you just do one, yeah, you might get lucky, but that is you are putting a lot of risk when you just do one. So spread it out, get multiple. Like I said in the bottom part, it kind of relates to the second part, is a lot of things have to go right. So even to race as a 3-year-old, I would say most of them, if you kept them from 2-year-old to 3-year-old, I would say like 95% will race at some point as a 3-year-old. And then a very small percent, like I said, 5% will just never race, even if you kept them to 3-year-old. But that's usually like some sort of injury or something happened, which can happen. Remember, when they're like this young, 2 years old, 1-year-old, they're like kindergartners. They're like first graders. They're still growing. Their body is not even, they are not adult yet. So their body is growing every single day. So it's like, they're not like, all the bones aren't fully developed, everything, the joints. So that's why you can't race them too hard either. So you have to kind of keep all that in mind, that these are very young horses and they're just starting out. So a lot of things can happen. So like I said in the bottom, some of the things that could go wrong is like you're not listening to the trainer. The trainer's saying slow down, and they're just going as fast as they can, and you can't race like that. You have to be raceable. You have to slow down, speed up. Getting around turns, just pure power. Maybe they're just not keeping up with the other horses. It could be that too. The desire to be great. You think of it, you just assume that a horse, you buy a standardbred yearling and it's going to be a good, it's going to just want to be a racehorse, and you'd be surprised. Some horses love it, and those are the best horses when they're like loving the work, they're loving racing, they're loving to beat other horses. Those are like dream horses. Then you get some horses that you gotta like make them do it, not make them do it in a bad way, but kind of more like ask them to do it, and like ask them to do their work, which just like humans, sometimes humans don't want to do their job, and you kind of have to kind of ask them to do their job, and they still might do a great job of it, but you have to ask them. So you kind of want the ones who want to do it, who love it. So it's easier on everyone like that. So anyway, that's the risk. So like I said, it's risky. That's why you can't have most of your stable be babies, because it's risky. It's a very risky. I say very. It's more riskier than like a claimer or a conditioned horse that's already racing, and you already know it just raced yesterday, so it should be able to race a week from now. These are, you don't have that. These you don't have that at all. So there's that unknown piece, but when I get to the rewards far outweigh that risk. Far outweigh that risk. So get to the rewards. For anyone who's owned babies before, when you watch them go from a yearling to learning to wear the equipment, learning to go left, go right, go fast, go slow, all that stuff. Learning just how the whole thing goes. How to pass horses, things like that, how to race on the lead, and you actually see them like go from a yearling and then actually develop into like a really good racehorse. That's like the best thing in the world. So, that is amazing. It's like, and you kind of fall in love with them. You kind of want to keep them around forever, and you got to remember it's a business at the same time. But that's like a really amazing experience that you can't get when you just buy another, claim a horse or buy a horse from somebody else. It's when you get them from the beginning, it's amazing. So the healthy and sound upper end. So the other thing to keep in mind is that it's kind of like inflation in the world, where there aren't a lot of the overnight races go for a lot of money. Like when I say overnight races going every week, just non-stakes races going every week at your local tracks, they go for pretty good money. So because of that, if you have a really good horse, like a really good horse for overnights, like an open trotter, open pacer, things like that, those are like really hard to buy. Like the owners of those do not want to sell those, unless like something is wrong with them. They are not selling those, and if they do sell them, they sell them for a fortune, like hundreds of thousands, or like a big number, like 100,000, 150,000, 200,000, things like that, and that's a lot of money to spend on a horse to race every week at your local track. So, do those come available every now and then? Yeah, but it's so hard to get your money back. So hard to get your money back through the overnight process racing. When you buy a crazy expensive racehorse. So it's just to get those super nice horses to add to your barn. It seems like it doesn't seem like you're like, oh well, it doesn't seem to make sense, but it actually does. Like buying yearlings, which I call through the draft, just like the NFL draft. You can actually get a really nice racehorse for cheaper than trying to buy one on the open market. Just buying an already good overnight racehorse. It's actually cheaper to just develop them yourself. It takes longer, but you're actually getting them cheaper. So that's one of the biggest things, and that's why we always look to try to keep them if we can, the good ones. That's why Go for Glory, we've built around the draft, as I call it, mainly around the draft, because it's just cheaper, and that gives you a chance to get better horses for less outlay, less cash outlay. Next thing is the fact that the upside. So the yearlings, the babies, the horses, they don't know how much their price is. So you can get a $10,000 horse that can become the one of the greatest horses in the game. You can argue, it's unlikely because maybe that horse is really small. The better horses are usually bigger, or that horse doesn't have a nice family, or that horse doesn't have a nice stallion. His father like a stud, and you probably so those horses are cheaper for a lot of reasons. Maybe they don't stand correctly. Maybe there's some sort of thing with them. But these horses, just like humans, can overcome. They can overcome that stuff and be really, really good. No one really knows what any of those yearlings will become. You can try to use your own past experience, and there are things which we can look at in an advanced video of what to look at for yearlings and things like that. But to help your chances. But you can get lucky with anyone, any of them. So that's one of the things. And when I say get lucky, means like we're talking here with the earnings potential, where they can make 200,000. I'm saying 2 million. Who knows? It could be more. I mean, that's 2 million is obviously that's like you hit a horse of the year type of thing. A horse of the year basically would be 2 million if they make 2 million in their 2 and 3 year old seasons, which is extremely unlikely. But you got to be in it to win it, and or be in it to have a chance. But 200,000, 300,000, 100,000, like we'll show later with Skybox, it's very possible to have a horse that does well like that. So you just got to be in it, and be in it every year, and keep taking your shots every year, and just have faith and just keep going, and you can get those really nice ones. And then last but not least, the other big, I call it reward, but it's more like a pro or a plus, is that when you buy a yearling, it's like a new car. 100% it's a new car right out the factory. It's a new horse right out the breeding farm. So it's not like when you do claimers and you're buying horses online or whatever for conditioned races, you don't know what you're just kind of taking their word for it, or you're kind of just evaluating the horse with your own eyes. You don't really know what that horse has been through. The horse might have a lot of miles on it. Horse may have had an injury at some point, or have a lingering injury. You don't really know anything. Just like a used, I don't want to compare them to a used car, but in a similar sense, when you do, like a purchase a used car, you don't really know what that car was put through. You don't know what kind of issues that car had. So with horses, when you buy a yearling right from a breeding farm, you know exactly what, you're getting a brand new horse, perfectly healthy, perfectly sound, and then you'll get a book of all the ins and outs about that horse, and then that gives you like the best insight for making the decision to keep that horse later on or not, or to sell it. So, to me, personally, the rewards far outweigh the risks. And that's why we make sure we do yearlings every year. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so we got a lot of words here again. I just want to explain the timeline of the baby game, starting with the 2-year-olds. So, and I'm not going to read everything here. So basically, late August through December is basically the biggest time of all the yearling sales. They basically start in late August and then go up until November, the major ones. And so the owners, around August and July, they're really starting to like get an idea of what their next draft is going to be for the next year. You have to prepare for it. You prepare your budget, you prepare what you're looking for, pacers, trotters, colts, fillies, all that stuff, where you want to race. And so that's what's happening in August and December. So it gets really crazy. But if you go to a yearling sale, it's actually a lot of fun. And especially if you're bidding on one, and you're kind of like battling it out with someone, and you're praying they back down, and you're praying, and when you actually see it like tick down, and you see it's like, oh, did we get it? And the trainer's like, or whoever's bidding's like, yeah, we got it. It's like a big thing, and everyone's all excited, and everyone's hoping it's the next champion. But it's like I said, it's like the NFL draft, same thing. So you're kind of hoping you got the horses you want, and you're kind of hoping to get them. And those auction sales are a lot of fun. And then from a yearling, what they're doing when you buy one in that time frame, they're not real. All they're doing is just they're kind of in kindergarten, and they're just basically learning how to put on equipment, put on the harness, things like that, how to take directions left to right, this and that, and then and they're jogging, just getting like building the foundation of like jogging miles in them. They're not really going any fast miles between August and the end of the year, at least for the trainers we work with. And then while all that's going on, there's big stakes racing going on for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. There's like finals. Big races going on, so there's a lot. That's like the craziest time of the year, basically. August, September, October, November. It's crazy. January through June, this is when the year slows down. This is like the off season. So the 2-year-olds, all they're doing is, this is when they actually first start going fast miles, and they're not when I say fast, like they start in like 3 minutes in January, and then by the end of June they're all the way. You're praying that they get down to 2 minutes, and then they're ready to qualify. Which is basically a non-betting race that proves that they're fast enough to compete in races. So that's what's happening in January through June. It's like they're slowly progressing. So that's when you can go to the track, you can watch your racehorse, just slowly but surely each month, just going a little bit quicker, a little bit faster. You're kind of watching them, seeing if they're staying on gate, watching their manners, and it's really fun to watch. And physically, you actually see the change too, pretty big. How they develop. So that's what's going on January through June. And then there's also that stakes season. So there's a lot of like stakes payments where you have to pay. Basically, you have to make payments to make your 2-year-old at that point eligible for the stakes racing for that year, and even sometimes for the next year as a 3-year-old. So that's what's going on January through June. That's why that period, it's important to have overnight race horses, because you can have horses kind of earning cash and providing action and getting cash flow at that time. So that's January through June. July through November, that's when the horses, that's like really fun. That's like the best time for me, for one of the best times. Well, actually it is the best time for the babies. That's when the babies are actually like ready, assuming all goes well, that's when the babies are ready to qualify. And that's when that's the first time that the owners get to really see kind of what they got, because you really don't know what you got until they're actually in the gate versus other horses. So, but it gives you an idea, like, oh, we might actually have something here, or oh no, this horse is not that great, or this horse looks amazing. That's that time when they start hitting the track, and then they're basically racing in stakes races from July to November. Or overnight races to get experience, which is just regular races every week. They don't race, 2-year-olds don't race that much. They only race maybe like 7-10 times usually. Sometimes they may race more, but I'll say usually like 7-11 times around there. But it's all compressed in that time period. And then you got the finals for a lot of like the state racing stakes, like New York Sire Stakes, Pennsylvania Sire Stakes, New Jersey, Massachusetts. Those purses can be huge. Like, and the finals can be anywhere from like $40,000 to $400,000, depending on where they're racing. And there's a lot of money to be made in a very short period of time. So it's like very compressed, and it's like crazy. Like, it's all compressed in a few months. And then basically at the end of all that flurry, in November, or usually around September, October, the horses are turned out. If they're really good, they're racing into November. If they're really good, the 2-year-olds. But usually, I would say usually by September, October, they're pretty much turned out, meaning they're just put in the field, eating grass every day, and just kind of hanging out and resting and growing until they begin their training again in December or January for the 3-year-old season. All right, 3-year-old season. This is the best, to me. Not the best. This is the highest earning potential season usually for racehorses. The reason being is they're 3-year-olds, so they're still racing. They can still race only against 3-year-olds, and versus having to race versus older horses. And if they're in their like a state racing program, they can race versus the same 3-year-olds from that state. So it's restricted to the same 3-year-olds from that state. So it limits the competition, and that's always good. It makes things easier on everyone. So these horses, they've already had a 2-year-old season, so they're already in shape. They know how everything works, so it doesn't take them that long to get back into race form and racing. So they might be turned out for a few months, But then if all goes well, and they'll start training in December and January, and then if all goes well, I mean, it doesn't take that long. By March, April, they should be qualifying and ready to go, because they're ready in shape. They're ready in shape. They had a full season of 2-year-old. They're ready in great shape. So it doesn't take them. It's not like a 2-year-old who's started from nothing. A 3-year-old is they've had a lot of miles, jogging and training miles in them. They're ready to roll pretty much. So then they'll qualify in March or April. March or April, they'll race pretty much until November-ish, assuming all goes well. And then they'll just do a combination of overnight racing, and then they'll do the state restricted racing. Owners normally do that because the money's just too good there. And then they'll do that basically until from May, June until September, October. The finals are in September, October for those. Then there's big races in November, and then what happens in November is that's when the owners have to make a decision. Do you want to keep this horse for 4-year-old stakes racing or for overnight racing? And usually around then, November, if you're making that decision, if you decide to keep them, then the horse will just get turned out or get a little short break, and then resume racing. Or they'll just keep racing if the horse, for whatever reason, is just a very stout horse and doing just fine. And if the decision was to sell the horse, they usually sell them around November, and then you kind of reload for the yearling season. So that's the story with 3-year-olds. So they like I said, they usually race more like 20 to 25 times. They could race 30 times, but I would say usually it's around 20 to 25 times they race, and usually it's the best earning season. And here's an example of what I mean by the best earning season. So I'm gonna put this over here. So this is an example of Skybox, who's a horse we had as a yearling. We still have him as a 4-year-old, but we had him as a yearling, 2-year-old, 3-year-old. And this example just gives you a little bit an example of how it goes. So as you can see, I don't have those few months from his yearling season. When we got him in October in the Lexington sale, so the October, November, and December bills were very small, like $2,000 or like $500, even less. And basically because by then they're not doing much. They're either turned out or just jogging pretty much. So the bills are very cheap, and there's no stakes payments. So it's usually like 2,000 or less. Those kind of stub period when they're a yearling. January they begin training. So as you can see, the bills picked up, and then you have stakes racing payments in this time as well. I didn't isolate stakes racing payments, but it's in these numbers. It's in the training costs. Skybox was not staked heavily as a 2-year-old. He was staked mainly just to New York regional races, and that's why the numbers are pretty small. It's just $3,000, 3,300. It's not that much because he wasn't really staked too much. So he made the races, and he qualified I think in May or June. He started racing in June. And you can see, then he started racing in July, August, September. September was where the final was, but I think he came in like 4th place or so. We had an outside post. And then you see the bills, and you see how it's all compressed, though. The 2-year-old season is all compressed. Those 4 months, it's just 4 months of racing, and it's all his earnings are in just those 4 months. It's very different than like an overnight racehorse, a claim or a conditioned horse that's earning every year. But the stakes horses is compressed, and they race for a lot of money, but it's compressed into a few months. So this is an example of how it goes. And then October he was turned out. That's why I was like 6, tiny number, meaning he was doing nothing. November, same thing. And then December, he started resuming training again for a 3-year-old season. So he had a little bit of a loss in 2-year-old season, but that's okay. 2-year-old season is tough. You make 31 grand as a 2-year-old. That's very good. So it's very good. That's rock solid. So that's a good number to you obviously you hope for like hundreds of thousands, but that's a good number. That's a good horse. Very good horse. 3-year-old season, as you can see, he was still training from January through April. And as you can see, 5,000, 4,200, 3,000, 4,300. It was a little bit more because we saw that he was good as a 2-year-old. We're like, oh, he's actually pretty good. He's actually pretty good as a 2-year-old. So then we staked him a little bit more as a 3-year-old. That's why the costs are higher here. And then, but as you can see, he earned a lot. 13,000, 24, 15, 20. He only raced in 6 months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he earned 89,000. So that's what it's all about. It's very compressed into a few months, and then we made a decision to keep him. That's why we still have the Bills in December, and we're racing him now as a 4-year-old. But this is kind of how it goes. Like it's, you're making those payments as they're developing, or resting or growing, and then there's that prime stakes season, which 2-year-olds, it's like June through November. He wasn't his final was in September, so we shut him down. We didn't want to keep pushing him. That's why he didn't race October, November. But some 2-year-olds do. A lot of 2-year-olds do. 3-year-olds, this is prime season. We could have kept racing him November, December, but he raced really hard, so we just gave him a little break. But we could have kept racing him November, December. But this gives you an example of like the costs. It's not like you, because the purses are later on. It seems kind of daunting sometimes and scary, but what's the word? The purses are so high and they race for so much purses that it far offsets those months that you're not having purses, if you follow. So it's worth it. The reward far outweighs the risk. Okay. And that is it. So basically, this is the presentation on investing in harness racing stakes racehorses, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, you can contact me, Pedro Baez, at pbaez@goforglorystable.com, or Charlie Longo at clongo@goforglorystable.com. And if hopefully you will take the chance and experience stakes racing, experience the yearlings, experience the whole process, and watching a young horse develop into a nice horse, and take that chance. You won't regret it. So thank you very much. Have a good day.